Hello everyone. Today we're working on my E90 BMW 335i. If you're new to this series and haven't had the opportunity to catch up on what's going on, check out the part 1 video of this project here, where we cover the initial assessment of damage on this car. In this video, we'll be wrapping up the repair on the BMW that was the result of an accident. Our previous price tally ended up at right around $1,300 for the wheels, trailing and control arms, and brake lines. We're soon to find out whether or not that number stays there. As you can see, we're hitting the ground running and ready to tackle this incredibly simple swap to new control arms to get the car rolling again. Or so we thought. When I was attempting to slide the rear trailing arm in and get everything lined up for the bolts, something just didn't feel right. Nothing was lining up as easily as it should have, and I wasn't really sure why. Eventually, I ended up giving up on the trailing arm and moving on to other control arms to see if the issue was due to the position of the mounting holes. You'll see me struggle a bit on the other arms as well on the driver's side. I couldn't get all the control arms lined up and fastened. I'd be able to get one or two, only to find out I still couldn't get all the bolts in. That at least lets me know that something else may be going on that might be causing the issue. Since the driver's side wasn't budging, I still wanted to make some progress on the car and decided to head on over to the passenger side. I never really covered the damage on the passenger side, mainly due to the fact that there wasn't much damage to cover. The driver's side took most of the impact, and the only issue that was clearly evident was the trailing arm being bent. Still, these control arms will be replaced as well. Heading back over to the rear driver's side, it becomes evident that the project is probably going to take a turn into a larger budget than originally anticipated. Shown here is the rear drive axle for the driver's side, and those of you with a keen eye probably caught this on the previous video and clips. No, that bulge on the axle shouldn't be there, and I wasn't going to gamble a failure like that when the intention was to get this on the road safely. At this point, I was a bit defeated knowing that the cost of this repair was going to jump up, so I went ahead and poked around the axle boot out of curiosity. This appears to be the result of the car sliding so hard that the axle popped out of its housing and slammed back into the wheel hub assembly. In my downtime staring at the ceiling, I'd wonder what else might go wrong, and tried to plan for the worst. Next thing that came to mind was the axle potentially being seized with the wheel bearing, which ended up happening. At this point, I go ahead and order a used wheel assembly, spindle, knuckle, whatever you want to call it, from 135i. What I didn't realize was that the 135i wheel hub was different than my car, so a new wheel hub and bearing was in order as well. This meant the old wheel hub needed to be removed, which I managed to do with a few specific long bolts that I had to order. Sorry for the skip into the future here. The intention was definitely to record the process of getting things in order on the rear, but patience was limited. Every time I would go to work on the car, I'd find something else that was broken. While it may seem like a small list of things to replace, it was the feeling of being so close to completion that defeated me, only to find out something else needed repairing and waiting weeks on end to get all the parts I needed. I got to a point where I just felt like I needed to make some progress, so I would bounce around the jobs that needed to be completed and pace myself through them. I didn't race to finish them. I knew I had things I needed to wait on, so instead I spent that time getting the rest of the car right. This was a stark reminder that Murphy's Law is for real. As you may remember, I was hoping this project would be straightforward and get me on the road, albeit with a hefty unplanned price tag. With the new used wheel hub assembly knuckle, wheel bearing, and wheel hub installed, the rest of the job should be a breeze. What's not seen due to the skip in the future was the hours I wasted trying to remove the previous axle from the previous wheel hub assembly, breaking one axle pusher in the process. I did everything I could to get that axle out of the assembly, bathed it in penetrating oil, smacked it with larger tools than I probably should have, and even torched it. This might have been a case of missing the right tool for the right job, as I didn't start with the axle pusher, but I'm almost certain the axle was seized in there. When I decided to bite the bullet and finally received all the parts, things started to come together pretty smoothly. The garage was a mess for a few months, so I had to work my way through the jobs in my free time and left most of my tools out for the job. Additionally, the parts trickled in slowly, as realizing what was salvageable and what wasn't was a process, as I wouldn't find out until I realized something was seized up or I wanted to err on the side of caution and get a new part. It's safe to say my wife wasn't a fan and was as ready for this job to be over just as much as me. From there, we can transition over to the brake lines. You'll notice the bracket for the brake line was also bent. Upon reinstallation later, I twisted this back to its original position. The hard brake line itself, however, was kinked and not salvageable. The next part of this was the line on the brake caliper. In the accident, the hard line that was connected to the back of the caliper ended up shearing off incredibly low and required a screw extractor. To my dismay, things were about to get a little hairy again. As I go to twist the screw extractor, it snaps right off at the same shear point that the brake line broke. Now I've got to figure out how else to remove the remnants of this. In comes the welder. I purchased a cheap flux core welder for a few side projects a couple of years back, and boy has it come in handy. In a previous job, an exhaust manifold bolt needed a nut welded on it, and here we are today with a brake caliper. Granted, with my experience, it did take a few tries to get the welds to stick. The front brake lines were smooth sailing. Since no damage really made it to this area, it was just a matter of removing the old lines and replacing them with the new lines. The lines that I ended up purchasing were from Turner Motorsports and are their stainless steel brake lines. This was an opportunity for an upgrade since stainless steel brake lines were already on the horizon at some point. It's also worth noting the pricing of this job might be a bit off due to fluctuating prices recently, but should still be able to give you an idea of what a job like this might cost. The installation of the new brake lines went rather smoothly, but some of the rubber grommets did need some encouragement to get into their brackets, as you'll see. As we wrap up this install, let's break down the pricing of everything that's gone into this so far. The trailing and control arms, brake lines, and wheels at right around $1,300 from my last video. The sway bar end links were replaced as well, which cost about $50 for the pair. The axle shaft, axle nut, and axle bolts ran me about $250. The wheel assembly from eBay, $115. A new wheel bearing at right around $50, the wheel hub at $115, the hard brake line for the rear, $60, a push rod, which is a mounting point for the rear subframe that you may have seen in some of the clips is bent, and its associated bolt, which is pictured near the end of the video for $50. And lastly, a few clips and plastic screws that I bought for the side skirt mounting at $30, including a few extra in case I needed them in the future. That puts this job at about $2,020, which at the end of the day isn't something I'd want to put into things that didn't need fixing in the first place, but it had to be done. I purchased this car at an amazing price, and I've been working on it for almost 2 years now. There's no way I could let this car go. Thank you all for joining me on this one. I hope this gives you some confidence in the next project you pick up, or gives you encouragement to finish that one sitting in your garage or driveway now. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe.